Hello and welcome to the Reading Corner with Mr. Wills, where today we are going to be carrying on with Chapter 14, The Three Plans. In the movies, people who go on top secret missions always have lots of fun gadgets and maps and ropes and sometimes even wear a cool hat. When you're 9 and just over 3/4 though, and have to go to school every day, rescue missions are a lot harder. Especially when you don't know where the people you want to rescue are, and you have to hide everything you're doing from the person you're going on the mission for. But even though we didn't have any gadgets or ropes or hats, we spent every break time and lunchtime and home time trying to think up new ideas that might help Ahmet find his family quickly. By Thursday morning, Tom and Josie and Michael had each come up with a plan. But I hadn't been able to think of anything. "Don't worry," said Josie. "You can help us see if ours will work." I tried to smile, but it didn't make me feel any better. On the way home, we went through all of the plans. Tom went first. He said we should write to the Prime Minister and tell her to open the gates. To tell her to keep the gates open until Ahmet had found his family. He had gotten the address for the Prime Minister's house from his dad and written out the letter. This is what it looked like. "Dear Prime Minister, we heard from some people on the bus that the government are going to lock the gates so that no more refugees can come in. But our friend Ahmed is a refugee boy. You might have heard of him because he's famous for beating up Brendan the bully, and he doesn't know where his mum and dad are and needs to find them. Please, Prime Minister, can you please keep the gates open so that he can find them so that he can be happy again? Thank you." I thought it was a good idea, and so did Josie, but Michael said it wouldn't work because the Prime Minister was in charge of the government and had probably been the one who had told the security guards to lock the gates and sent them her special keys. So we couldn't ask her for help at all. Then Josie talked about her plan, which was called the Special Appeal. She said we should ring a newspaper and tell them all about it, because her mum and dad are always complaining about how many special appeals there were for charities in the newspapers, and once the appeal went out, Ahmet's mum and dad would see it and get in touch. Josie had written the special appeal and made it as short as possible so that the newspapers could print it quickly. This is what it looked like. Special Appeal. "Please everyone, a boy called Ahmet, who is in Nelson's school, ran away from Syria because of bombs and lost his mum and dad too. If you see a man and a woman who look like this is their son or Ahmet's mum and dad, please ring Mrs. Khan on the telephone number at our school, which is below. We need to find Ahmet's family before the gates are locked, which is why this appeal is so special." We all liked the special appeal plan, but then Tom said that even if we put the special appeal in a newspaper, the newspapers would only be sold in England, and Ahmet's mum and dad and anyone who might have seen them would never get to see it. He knew because when he lived in America, he only saw American newspapers, so that's what it must be like in all countries around the world too. Then Michael told us his plan. We should go and write to the High Court, to the judge sitting in the highest chair in the land, and ask them to order all of the security to open the gates so that Ahmet's mum and dad can get over here, he whispered. It's called an appeal too. I heard my mum talking about them because her law firm were always doing them for people. I'd ask her how to help Ahmet, but she's always complaining about how much work she has to do, and she charges hundreds of pounds an hour." "But we can't afford that," cried Tom. "I know," replied Michael, rolling his eyes, "which is why I'm saying that we should do the appeal ourselves." "Is it an appeal like my newspaper one?" asked Josie. Sort of, except it's for a judge, and we all need to find the highest judge in the land and write to them," replied Michael. "We can even send them your appeal," he said, giving Josie a nudge on the arm. "We only need to change it a little bit. Mum's always saying that judges have nothing better to do than read appeals all the time." We were all excited about this idea the most, and as no one could think of anything that might be wrong with it, we decided to go to the school library at home time and find out the name of the highest judge in the land. So when the last bell rang, we all told Ahmet we had to go home quickly so he wouldn't follow us, and headed straight there. Our school library isn't as big as the one that Mum works in, but it has larger windows and lots more sunlight, which means you can see the books better. Mrs. Finicky is our librarian. She always wears brightly coloured clothes and red lipstick, and you don't ever have to look for her because she's always standing behind the library counter. I like Mrs. Finicky because she always gets excited when you ask her anything. She tells people off for not looking after the books properly, just like Mum. She has a large sign on her counter that says, "Books are like people. Look after the covers and they'll take you on a great adventure." I like it because it's fun to imagine people as books and guess about what kind of adventure they might take you on. And we got to the library counter. We all looked up at Mrs. Finicky. She was wearing a sky blue top and a sky blue skirt, and Mrs. Finicky smiled and looked down at all of us and said, "Hello, and how can I help you all today then?" Tom and Josie and me looked over at Michael and waited. So he asked, "Miss, do you know where we might be able to find the highest judge in the land and where they are? We need to find out for homework." "Really?" said Mrs. Finicky, frowning. We all nodded. Mrs. Finicky scratched her chin. "I think we'll have to look online for that one," she said, and started typing in her computer. We nodded and waited excitedly for an answer as Mrs. Finicky narrowed her eyes and looked on the screen. After a few seconds she said, "Here we go. Right. Was it the name of the Lord Chief Justice you were after, or the High Court Judge for the Family Division?" We all looked at Michael, and Michael said, "Family Division, please." Mrs. Finicky wrote the name down on a piece of paper. When she gave it to Michael, we all looked over his shoulder and read, "H.C. Family Division, Dame Leslie Williamson." "Anything else?" said Mrs. Finicky. Josie said, "Does it have her address there, miss?" Mrs. Finicky frowned again. "Her address?" she asked. "You have to send her a letter as part of your homework?" We all nodded. So that it gets to her by tomorrow," I added. "It's the High Court of Justice you'll be needing to write to," said Mrs. Finicky, narrowing her eyes at the computer screen again as she copied it down. "But even if you post it today and it gets to her office tomorrow or on Saturday, remember that the courts are closed over the weekend, and it won't be the judge who gets your envelope. She'll have to have a secretary to open the mail for her." She handed the slip of paper with the address on to Josie. "Anything else?" She looked at our downcast faces. "I'm sure she'll read your letter eventually," she added gently. "It might just take a while." We left and gathered in the hallway outside. "What are we going to do now?" asked Josie. Her face was all pink, which is what happens when she gets really upset. "Even if we send the judge that appeal right away, the gate will be shut before she even gets it. It's already Thursday, and after the weekend is over, we'll only have 5 more days." We all looked at Michael, who shrugged and looked at the floor. "We've got to think of another idea," said Tom urgently. We all nodded, but I felt sick inside. I was scared that Ahmet's family wouldn't be found in time. We were all silent on the bus ride home. Everyone was thinking hard, but I could tell from all our faces that none of us had come up with anything. I felt the worst because at least everyone else had had an idea. I hadn't come up with a single plan. Now, I know it was all because my brain wasn't ready to think of anything then. It wouldn't be ready until the weekend, but when it was, it came up with a plan so fantastic that nobody could say no to it, not even a judge sitting in the highest chair in the land. Right, thank you all for watching. Join me soon for chapter 15. Bye bye.